Welcome back to B Master 79. Today we are doing a full ielts speaking part 2 and part 3 walkthrough on the topic Describe an impressive English lesson you had and enjoyed. We will plan it, then deliver a complete Band 9 performance, and then take all 4 part 3 questions. One thing before we start. Band 9 here is our own quality assessment against the public ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. First, what Part 2 actually is. The examiner hands you a card and a pencil, and you get 1 minute to prepare. You then speak for 1 to 2 minutes, uninterrupted. The 3 bullet points are a scaffold, not a checklist. You are not marked on ticking them off, and the final line, the and explain line, carries the most marks because that is where you stop reporting and start reflecting. Stopping at 1 minute 10 is the most common way to lose band score here. Here is the card. Describe an impressive English lesson you had and enjoyed. You should say what it was about, when you had it, and what the teacher did, and explain why you enjoyed the lesson. Notice that the first 3 bullets are all facts, and only the last one asks you to think. So here is how to use that 1 minute. 4 beats. Scene where, when, what, and how you felt going in. Action, what the teacher actually did, in concrete detail. Turn, the moment something shifted for you, and meaning, why it mattered. That last beat is there and explain, and it should be the longest, roughly 30 seconds each. Write nouns on the card, never full sentences, because if you write sentences you will read them, and reading sounds like reading. Let us build the notes. Scene first. Final year of high school, a speaking and debate lesson. The motion on the board: should the city ban motorbikes from the old quarter? About 4 years ago, in the spring. And crucially, an emotional starting point. I was demoralized, and I froze every time I had to speak. That starting point is what makes the ending land later. Action. And notice how specific this is. There was no phrase list to memorize. She split the class into 2 camps and gave us 20 minutes to prepare. Then the twist: a whistle halfway through, and we had to swap sides, which meant rehearsing was pointless, and you had to genuinely listen. One concrete mechanism like that is worth 10 vague adjectives about a good teacher. Turn, and then meaning. Terrified for 5 minutes. Then I stopped noticing myself because I was too busy trying to win. And a small, slightly embarrassing detail: I caught myself borrowing my opponent's argument. Then meaning. English stopped being a subject and became a tool. That is the sentence the whole answer is built towards. Now the delivery. Listen for the 4 beats, and remember the candidate is invented. Copy the structure and the language. Never copy the story.
I'd like to talk about a lesson I had in my final year of high school, a speaking class that completely changed how I thought about English. It was a debate lesson essentially. The question on the board was whether our city should ban motorbikes from the old quarter. This was about 4 years ago, in the spring, during a period when I was frankly quite demoralized. I'd been studying English for years and still froze whenever I had to speak. What the teacher did was the interesting part. Instead of handing out a list of useful phrases to memorize, she split us into 2 camps and gave us 20 minutes to prepare. But here was the twist: halfway through the debate she'd blow a whistle and we'd have to swap sides and argue the opposite case. So there was no point rehearsing the scripts. You had to genuinely listen to the other side, because in 10 minutes you'd be the one making their argument. I remember being terrified for about 5 minutes, and then, somewhere in the middle, forgetting to be self-conscious entirely. I was simply too busy trying to win. I even caught myself borrowing an argument from the girl I'd been arguing against, which she pointed out loudly to the entire room. The reason it stuck with me is that it was the first time English stopped feeling like a subject and started feeling like a tool. Up to that point, I'd been treating the language as something to be accurate in, that lesson reframed it as something to be useful in. And once that clicked, my fluency improved far faster than in the previous 2 years of grammar drills because I finally had a reason to open my mouth.
That is the complete part 2 answer. Around 300 words, which is a comfortable 2 minutes. Pause the video here and read it through once, watching how each beat hands over to the next. Here is the language worth stealing from that answer. Not idioms you will never use, but flexible frames, which sounds dry, but here was the twist. Stopped feeling like something, started feeling like something else. Once that clicked, each of these works on almost any part 2 card. Now part 3. This is a 4 to 5 minute discussion linked to your card by theme. The questions turn abstract. They are about societies and causes, not about your life anymore. If the examiner pushes back or asks why, that is a good sign. Aim for roughly 4 to 6 sentences. And remember, you are marked on the quality of your reasoning, not on being right. The shape for every part 3 answer. Claim, take a clear position in your first sentence. Cause, give the mechanism. Why does that actually happen? Counterpoint, concede something or contrast a second case. Conclusion, weigh the two and land somewhere. That third step, the concession, is what separates Band 7 reasoning from Band 9 reasoning. Question 1. Why are some kids better at English than others? The trap here is to say some people are just talented and stop, so the claim pushes back on that. Then the cause, incidental input versus textbook only. Then a counterpoint about early embarrassment. Then a conclusion that weighs both.
I think there's a temptation to attribute it to raw talent, and I'm sure aptitude plays some role, but I'd argue the bigger variables are exposure and emotional association. A child who meets English through cartoons, games, and music absorbs it incidentally without ever experiencing it as work, whereas a child whose only contact is a textbook is essentially learning a code rather than a language. And then there's the affective side. Children who get embarrassed early tend to develop an anxiety that shuts down risk taking, and you simply can't acquire a language without taking risks. So environment and confidence probably outweigh innate ability by quite a margin.
Question 2. What human qualities make a good teacher? Everyone says patient and kind, so we take subject knowledge as a given, define a very specific kind of patience, add a counterpoint about how expertise can destroy empathy, and finish with something slightly unexpected.
Beyond subject knowledge, which I'd take as a given, I think the decisive quality is patience. Though a very specific kind, the ability to hear a mangled sentence and respond to what the student meant rather than what they actually said. Closely related is the capacity to remember what it felt like not to understand something. A lot of genuine experts lose that, and their explanations become useless as a result. And now I'd add a certain theatricality, honestly. The best teachers I had were performers to some degree. They understood that attention has to be earned every lesson, not assumed.
Question 3. Why do some parents want their children to be good at foreign languages? Claim, the obvious motive is economic. Cause, a passport to better universities. Counterpoint, but it is not purely instrumental. There is status in it too. Conclusion, the overlooked motive, which is freedom.
The most obvious motivation is economic. Parents see language proficiency as a passport to better universities and higher paying jobs, particularly where the domestic market is crowded. But I don't think it's purely instrumental. Many parents, especially those who never had the opportunity, themselves attach a symbolic value to it. Being multilingual signals a certain cosmopolitan status. And there's a third motive that gets overlooked, which is a genuine hope that their children will have wider horizons than they did, that they won't be confined to a single country's perspective. That's less about employability and more about freedom, really.
Question 4. What do you think about the situation of learning English in Vietnam? This one wants an evaluation, so give a balanced one. Improved enormously but unevenly. Cities are strong. The urban and rural gap is the problem, and the system is still exam-driven.
It's improved enormously, but unevenly, I'd say. In the major cities, the standard is genuinely impressive. There's an enormous private tuition sector. Children start extremely young, and you meet teenagers who are effectively bilingual. The gap between urban and rural provision, though, is still quite stark, and that risks turning English into a marker of privilege rather than a shared skill. The other criticism I'd make is that the system remains heavily exam-driven. Plenty of learners can dissect a reading passage but hesitate in a 2-minute conversation. So the direction of travel is clearly positive, but I think the emphasis could shift further towards communication.
And the Part 3 language bank. These are the phrases that make reasoning sound analytical rather than rehearsed. There is a temptation to attribute it to, which I would take as a given, a motive that gets overlooked. The direction of travel is clearly positive. Learn the frames and fill them with your own content. So why does this reach band 9? Fluency and coherence, 4 signposted beats, no restarts, and the story carries its own momentum. Lexical resource, precise but unshowy word choice. Grammatical range, past perfect, conditionals and embedded clauses, used because the meaning needs them, not to show off. And pronunciation, stress on the contrast words, and a pause before the turn. One important note. Band 9 here is our own quality assessment against the public ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. Your turn. Set a timer for 1 minute and write only nouns for your 4 beats. Then record yourself for 2 minutes and do not stop even when you stumble. Play it back once and mark the exact second you stopped telling a story and started listing facts. Then take the 4 Part 3 questions with claim, cause, counterpoint, conclusion. Comment your meaning sentence below. That one line is where band 9 lies. See you in the next one.